It looks like we are live, and one of the things we're going to talk about today, coming up later on, and Colin hadn't heard about this, but we're going to talk about Pentagon documents reveal the U.S. has planned for a Bitcoin rebellion, and I mentioned Colin, so we are here with Colin Cantrell. He is the founder of Nexus Earth. It is a cryptocurrency with its own blockchain. And you guys have been around for a while, but it was like 2014 is when you guys were first starting off in the game.
Yeah. Started developing the protocol, it would be May of 2014. And then we launched that September of 2014. And then it's just been consistent ongoing development. A number of years was just assessing the industry and assessing the technology properly. And so we started with like an old Purecoin code base just so I could learn to understand how to think like Satoshi. And then I liked Sonny King's, proof of stake, who was the first proof of stake implementation. So I studied all of that code to understand it before we started changing it, I guess you could say. And from that understanding, like Nexus kind of has been born of all of the, how should I say it, the architectural issues of blockchain technology, because a lot of people say blockchains are inherently unscalable. And that's not true. That is a narrative from Blockstream. It's the general narrative of we need layer 2 solutions, because if layer 1 doesn't scale, then you need layer 2, right?
Then how is Blockstream going to make money though if they can't make
exactly, yeah. And it's pretty apparent if you look at the evidence, right? If you just look at the track record, like old posts on Reddit, right, on our BTC or our Bitcoin. I can't remember what one was the non censored one. But if you look at old posts, the most downvoted posts from like 2012, 2013, you'd see a bunch of posts about Bitcoins and tulips, right? That was the common narrative, right, against Bitcoin for its early years. Oh, you guys and your tulips, it's going to fail, blah, blah, blah. Bitcoin's dead. There was a website called bitcoinsdead.com, right? Because it was just this joke of showing.
I think 99 Bitcoins has had like the last 200. I mean, this was a couple years ago that it was at 200 times Bitcoin's died, and now it's, we're probably well past that. But I guess so. It sounds like you have to know what Bitcoin is before you can make Bitcoin better or expand upon it first.
Yeah. And I think that just based on my observations purely, so just take that as my observations. I've noticed that a lot of people are maybe seeing the potential to make money in the industry, and it doesn't take much effort technically to make that money, right? Like Tron is a perfect example. You could just copy Ethereum J, right? And then plagiarize a couple white papers and then do some, psychological manipulation and marketing, and boom, now you have a cryptocurrency project, right? But
I know by late 2017, part of me was like, instead of like bust my ass trying to think of like all these ways to get, crypto IRAs and crypto trust and charitable trusts, like why don't I create like an ERC20 token, spend 2 days on a white paper maybe, and then become a millionaire that way. And it almost seemed like, so many people were just skipping all these different steps and just going right to how we're going to change the world with everything, everyone buying into their BS. And I liked how you guys did, basically you just launched Nexus without doing a pre-mine and without doing an ICO, without doing, which is hallmarks of, not to say all of them are scams, but when you're doing these, there's certain hallmarks where if you check up enough of these hallmarks together, it's usually not a good thing. And so I commend you guys for not doing that.
Oh, thank you. And we want to build something real and something sustainable, and we have built something real and sustainable, and not just technologically but like economically, right? If you have developers having 80% of the total supply, it's kind of a joke to the economics of the system, right? Just nobody should have that large of a share, but that's how some of these projects like look like they have such a large market cap, right? And they have ridiculous supplies, right? Like billions and billions of tokens, because one Satoshi price swing at 1 billion tokens is a lot more change in your value than, one Satoshi at like 100 million, right?
And a lot of people don't even understand that they're like, oh, well, this one costs 20 cents and this one's costs, $10,000 at the moment. So automatically the one that's 20 cents is cheaper, not realizing that, oh, Ripple has, 100 billion of them. Or I'm not sure what Ripple's trading at now, but
and a good example, let's just say you have a cryptocurrency with 1 billion tokens, right? And each token is worth $1, just so that we have something simple to work with, right? Now, let's say the price goes to $2, right? So the market cap at first is going to be $1 billion, right? And then the price doubles, it's going to be $2 billion. So the market capitalization, right, the total money in the economy has doubled. It's increased by $1 billion, right? Now let's go down to like Nexus, right? We're going to maximum have 100 million tokens, or coins, right? That's going to be the maximum amount of NXS ever created. So now let's say we're $1. So our market cap's 100 million. And then let's say we double in price to $2. Now we've only gained $100 million in market cap versus $1 billion, right? Where the price change could have been like, as far as liquidity in the market, it could have been just the same amount of resistance to change the price, but yet the same amount of resistance would yield you $1 billion increase in market cap versus 100 million, right? So it gives you an unrealistic expectation of how much value is actually in that market cap, because market cap should accurately model how much money you can get in and out, right? But they don't necessarily, and that's why you're seeing more of these really, really large supply tokens and things like that, because they just need small price swings to make their price go up higher, right? It's just a play on the economics, right? But we're not looking at how to play economics to make yourself look a certain way, right? We're here to actually...
Well, you guys know a lot about economics.
Yeah. And so, my wife is, studied economics, and she worked for an investment bank way back in the day. So she saw really early, like, all the issues with it, right? So she helps with some of the economic perspectives in the game theory, but like the power of these systems is in how you implement the economics in the game theory, right? A blockchain doesn't just build itself magically. It does because there's incentives, right? Miners earn money and verify the transactions, and you need
some people say Satoshi's an AI, so maybe in that case it would be. So
yeah, I mean, and that's another downside to Bitcoin, right? I mean, if you look at the formations of everything, right, or the source of something, right? Now Bitcoin, the source of it is secrecy, hidden, you don't know who Satoshi is. Experimental, right? It was like a bit of a beta project. If you look at the original Bitcoin code, I mean, it was like pretty simple, pretty raw, right? I mean, he said in his original post, actually.
Well, simple to you, maybe not simple to everybody watching or listening, but
what I mean is simple is like, okay, so there's like three main checks. You have check block, accept block, and connect, right? Check is just like before I have the blockchain, right? Think of the blockchain as like your point of reference. So when you don't have a blockchain, you're just like this object floating around in the universe, right? You're just there is no connection to anything. You just boom. And that's like where you have an orphan block or something like that. So check is the first set of checks where you say this block out in the middle of the ether can be checked without reference to the blockchain, right? Like I can check its proof of work.
No pun intended with ether. But.
Yeah, I can check its proof of work calculations without having previous blocks. I can check digital signatures and things like that, right? So check block comes in first, then accept block comes in when you actually accept it to the blockchain. You link it to the previous block. You have to have that previous block in order to accept it, right? And then you write it to disk and accept usually. And then connect is where you actually connect the inputs of the transactions, right? So those are the three main stages, right? Now, accept block, right, in Bitcoin 1.0 was 5 lines of code. I mean, and for perspective, it's like maybe a few hundred lines of code. And each one of these checks, right, in this accept block are really critical checks, right? They are critical to the security of the network. So, I mean, just from that being like 5 lines of code, it just, it was really, 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 really raw, right? Satoshi wrote in the original description, he says, there is no guarantee the network state will not need to be reset. He's like, this is like pure alpha. Like he just launched it and created the forum because he needed to get people involved on the network to start testing it and growing it and learning, right?
Is that sort of like, perfect is the enemy of the good? So let's just get something, or, let's just get something out there now, and then other geniuses will kind of come in here and
kind of
and make it better.
Well, I mean, and Satoshi didn't really know a whole lot about peer-to-peer stuff too. I mean, some of his early posts you read, he's, asking about how to open up ports, and he's like, oh, what's the best way? And some people are like, oh, use UPnP, right? And that's what they still use to this day.
And I have no idea what you just said, so you said very casually.
Okay, so you've got like 10 computers behind your router, right? So you're sharing the same IP address on the router, right? All your traffic's going in and out of the router. So you need to have a local address, right? So if somebody's trying to connect to your IP address, your router is not going to know what computer to send that traffic to. right? Because you just got like 10 computers. It's like, well, there's one port and you got 10 computers. So UPnP forwards that port. It opens up the port and it forwards it to your local computer, right? It gives it a pathway. You need a pathway and says it goes to this computer. And that's called NAT traversal, right? Which stands for Network Address Translator. Since there's only 4.3 billion IP addresses in IP version 4, you can't have a dedicated IP address for every device, right? That's where IP version 6 has come to try to help that, but it's 20 years in and it's not been adopted yet.
And this is basically what you're saying, like from the IPv6, is that there's not enough different, like the lengths of characters is only so long that as we start getting into the Internet of Things and there's more and more and more devices connected up to this, that we're going to need.
Yeah, a certain number of bytes, right? Like if you've heard that in computers, a byte is just 8 bits, right? So the maximum number you can store in 8 bits is 255. Right?
It's like crypto gang signs. No.
Yeah.
So
a byte can just be between 256 values, zeros including a value. So it's 0 to 255. So 256 values. Then you add 2 bytes, you multiply 256 by 256, which is about 65,536, right? And then, you get to 4 bytes, which you multiply by 256 and multiply by 256 again, and that gets you 4.3 billion. So in 4 bytes, that's a maximum value. If you notice your IP address, 255, 255, 255, 255, that's the biggest IP address, the maximum IP address. That's the top, and that's that value in integers, right? Instead of just individual bytes, is about 4.3 billion, right?
So we can't have 7 billion people on Earth who each have 5 devices.
No, or you can't even have 1-to-1, right? With
we can't spy, track, trace, and surveil every single person on Earth, right? And give them all vaccines unless we have unless we have this. So
to fix that, they have these network address translators where your router can, many devices can share the same IP address, but with peer-to-peer technology, right, it becomes a little more difficult because you have to be in an available state. You basically have to go out to the network and say, yo, you can connect to me, right? Allowing somebody to connect to you requires that open port in your router, right? For you to connect to someone else, your NAT is actually giving you a special port. So like if I go to google.com, I'm opening up a connection and the NAT is opening up and saying, okay, well, this one request to Google needs to go back to this computer.
Or DuckDuckGo.com.
Or DuckDuckGo, right? That's what
we don't want to give Google any more free advertising.
I'm totally done with Google, thankfully. Like I actually set up this. It's called Nextcloud. You check it out. It's self-hosted. It's pretty much like a free open source cloud where you can host all your files. You can do document editing. Like it's got everything that Google has and then some. And you can download these apps and stuff in it. So it's like I just set that up now. We're like completely Google free. It's nice. Like,
and if you're watching this right now on YouTube, please also as an end run around, if you'd also join the podcast, we do have links that are actually scrolling across the screen where it's on iTunes, Spotify, all the places where all your favorite podcast catching apps. And it also, I don't really think that this is going to be here forever. So right now, if you're watching us on those platforms, just please, you can join our emergency text list down below by typing in Liberty Advisor, one word, to 71441. Then we have a way to keep up with you guys, not in the event, like the day we're kicked off, or whether we get kicked off or we kick ourselves off. That remains to be seen. But, they don't want certain messages getting out. They don't want people talking about crypto. That's probably the least of their concerns of all the stuff I talk about. But, but you know what? Crypto is something that can help, I wouldn't want to say like overthrow the system, but if everyone at the Black Lives Matter rallies, if they really wanted to help change the system, they would be getting into cryptocurrencies and knowing that that's the way to get the man. Because I see things like where it's J.P. Morgan Chase supports Black Lives Matters, and then like when you understand like the history of the founding of the Federal Reserve and how like J.P. Morgan was basically like at like the root is basically like the root of the founding of the Fed, and then the Fed is in and of itself is like this high tech, basically slave system.
High tech?
I guess I would say for back then it's a high tech slave system.
It's a new type of enslavement. Yeah, it's like the type of enslavement.
Like, these slaves, like we've got to feed the slaves and do this and that and make sure they're not the slaves are probably getting better health care as slaves than we are today. Because they wanted to make sure that people actually were doing work. But let's let them run around a little bit. Give them these little cards, and then because they found that we're more productive if we think we're free. And so, hey, we just siphon money off every single transaction, every dollar that's ever been created.
The really powerful thing that they actually did succeed in doing is creating self-enslavement, right? Like where people enslave themselves and then they act in this kind of state of schizophrenia, right? I got this, there's a line from a movie, My Dinner with Andre, which is really great. It kind of highlights that. He's like, do you ever wonder why people never leave New York? They're just like, oh, why would you leave New York? The pride. Oh, it's the best city on earth. Oh, New York. Why would you ever leave? New York. And he's like, have you seen so many people that have been trying to get out? And he's like, but they can't. He's like, do you know why? He's like, because New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, right? Where the inmates create the prison and the inmates act as guards. They live in a state of schizophrenia. Why would you ever leave New York, the best city on earth? Oh, you're an upper man, blah, blah, blah. Why would you ever leave? You've got the blah and the blah. And these people never leave, right? They actually create their own prisons, and they pay a lot of money for big prison cells, right?
Well, the thing is, you're paying so much for your big prison cell that now you can't afford to leave because all your you have hardly any free time because you're stuck in that rat race.
Stuck in that rat race trying to accumulate the money, then you never see your house.
And now the new model, they're trying to build it down, just south of us, probably like 30, 40 miles away. Bill Gates has his, bought out all the land over there, I think by like Tonopah-ish area, and he's creating like a whole smart city. Like as you're driving out on the 10 out to San Diego, that they're having that be like the beta model of like the smart cities in America.
Yeah, and they want to do smart cities because they, want to have everything computerized and controlled. But like one thing that, there's a lot, like, how should I say it? There's a lot of talk about this whole, futurist agenda of like everybody's under 1984 and control and whatever. From my perception of it and my understanding of computers, we don't have enough computing power to put on 1984 everywhere. There's just not enough. There's like, we're already running in. If you notice, processors aren't getting any faster, right? They're not like 10 gigahertz, 20 gigahertz now. They're just adding cores, right? 16 cores, 50 cores.
What's weird is like I've got one of the computers behind me is just like a 2013 like Surface Pro, and I think at the time I had like 8 gigabytes of RAM, and now like you go look at the new Surface Pros and they started like 8 gigabytes of RAM, like, but that was like 7 fucking years ago. Like,
Moore's law is not linear, right? Moore's law is like, oh, every 2 years we double or whatever, right? It's logarithmic, right? So what logarithmic means is like it starts off fast and then it tapers off, right? Because you start running into other issues. You can't just continue to make things smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because you get these weird effects, like one of which is called quantum tunneling, right? Where let's say you have a barrier right here and you have an electron sitting on this side. The electron will just magically decide at one point in its life cycle that it doesn't want to be on this side. It's just going to go poof, and now it's on this side, right? And it's called quantum tunneling because there's no way that it could have actually made its way through the matter, but it in a way disappears and reappears on the other side, right?
Yeah, it's like Joe Biden when he was, for all the racism stuff, and now he's over here supporting Black Lives Matter. Yeah. So, don't mind it when I was writing the 94 crime bill, putting all the black people in. I'm going to make up for it by having Kamala Harris as my VP, who was also, putting black people in jail in California. So that's my guess is that she's going to be the VP pick. And
who knows? Yeah.
But because the thing is, once you understand how crypto works and how this is like the actual way to help free humanity, all the other stuff just seems like complete BS. And now, here, obviously, this is not going to be the beginner show over here. We've already gotten into quantum tunneling. Yeah. That didn't take very long, but we didn't really have any like we had some interesting discussions before the show too. Probably something we can't talk about, but even just everything, even like Arizona in general and everything going on here.
There's a lot of interesting things happening, to say the very least. So, on the quantum tunneling thing, this quantum tunneling breaks processors. When you get to a certain size, quantum tunneling happens more and more, and it burns these processors out. So we're really kind of reaching our like maximum speed, right? Especially with the clock speed. So they're just multiplying cores. So if you extrapolate out that understanding, you start to realize, oh wait, man, like 7 billion people.
And what's a core versus processing? It's basically like you're just taking the process power you already have, then like putting another one of those there.
You're adding it's just adding more processors into the system rather than increasing the clock speed, because they're really kind of like they're kind of tapped out. Once you start getting into the giga range of things, like especially with electronics, like you start running into other issues, because when you get past 300 gigahertz, let's just say with EMF, like communication frequencies, 300 gigahertz is where infrared light starts, right? So you start coming out of electricity into light, right? When you start getting up to those really, really high frequencies. So we're only like 3-5 gigahertz, right? But I'm suspecting they're running into more issues like that, where you start just radio waves and everything they start acting a lot more different, right? When you get into those really high frequencies, like especially like you get really more directional range and it's like shorter throughput, and like that's where a lot of the controversy with 5G is and blah blah blah, right? But
now, do you see also? I've heard people talking like the different like resonances. I'm not an expert in this.
Yeah.
It's not my area, but like there's certain resonances from the 5G, and I think there's like a difference between the 5G we have now versus the 5G that they're proposing. Isn't necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, they're totally different. I mean, the 5G right now isn't. I wouldn't say like you're gonna get fried. It's using just 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz, so that's what Wi-Fi uses, right? So they're not. I mean, they're much higher than what they were. I think the previous 4G was 900 megahertz, or around that area. So it's an increase in the frequency throughput, but it's nothing. You're not being bombarded with frequencies that you haven't already experienced before, right? Like your Wi-Fi router, right? If you sit closer or whatever, you're getting the same RF exposure, if not more, from your Wi-Fi.
We're good because it's right behind me. So.
Yeah, so that's fine. But when you start getting up into the higher, like I think they're trying to do like 24 gigahertz, and then they want to eventually get up to like 100 gigahertz and whatever. I mean, once you get into those really, really, really high frequency, your usability kind of goes down significantly because of your range, and also the radio wave gets a lot more directional, right? When you get up into those really high frequencies, it starts acting more like light, right? And so it's not as effective, but one reason that they want to push those really high frequencies is because when you get to millimeter wavelength, right? Now you have millimeter granularity for tracking, right? If you're dealing with wavelengths, like I think 2.4 gigahertz is about 2.5 centimeters, right? Like regular Wi-Fi, then 5 is like that big, right? As far as a wave cycle, I mean, 12.5 megahertz is like 80 meters, right? So there's
like if you're like a day trader, like looking at like a daily chart versus like a minute by minute chart versus looking at like a second by second chart of just like
the really high 5Gs allow you a lot more focus, like granular focus, so that you can have better tracking, location tracking, right? And triangulation, and like be able to see people in stores and stuff. But like the other side of it too, where this is like where I say everything kind of balances itself out, right? Like they're trying to push these really high frequencies, but these high frequencies, for one, don't penetrate through walls, right? And they're going to require these stations to be everywhere. It's kind of like DC power was back.
Did you hear like that story, like where like the Xbox from back in the day, like the Kinect thing could like go through and like basically map out like your home through like being able to penetrate walls? And this is like probably, sure. I mean, this has been like 8 years ago or something. Like it's not even new. Where like the old school Xbox Kinect thing could like literally like map out like your whole entire home through different pinging off other devices.
Yeah. And so that's kind of part of it, that agenda. I don't think it's going to really go too far because, I mean, there's a huge infrastructural cost to developing all those towers, especially once you start getting into really high frequencies. You run into throughput issues, you have line of sight issues, right? It's a lot more directional. It's not going to pass through walls.
Because you need a lot more of them. It's not like the old school where you had, towers here and there. It's like you need tons of these.
Yeah, higher frequency means that it's not going to travel as far. You're going to have more path loss.
So we need more fake cactuses all around here. No, they're disguising the 5G and like different cactus arms.
And so, I mean, the fact that there's been thousands of 5G towers burned in UK. Now, these 5G towers out there are 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz. So they're basically burning Wi-Fi, right? Which is cool. I mean, I think it's a good thing because it's pretty obvious that, governments and authorities just do whatever they feel they want to do, and they don't care about their people. Well, they say they care about their people.
I don't know. I saw a march where they were yesterday in Philly going to the mayor's house. It was like all the Italians trying to defend the Columbus, and finally they're like, you know what? They're going to take down Columbus. They're going to take him down. Let's go to the mayor's house. And you have like 1,000 people just walking right to the mayor's house. And it's just like, you know what? That's what they care about. You see 1,000 people outside your home, and now all of a sudden.
Now they're accountable, right? And for the first time in a long time, these people are being held accountable for their actions, right? Their criminal actions, like running the world, and not just lying and manipulating and cheating, but like actually causing harm on millions of people for a long time. I mean, they've been terrorizing things for quite a significant amount of time. And it's good to see people standing up. And like the burning of the 5G towers now, like health-wise, it's kind of pointless because you're not really saving yourself from anything. It's just like turn off your damn Wi-Fi if you're scared of that, right? But I mean, the fact that people are doing it is showing that people are taking things into their own hands when they don't feel like there's an appropriate feedback loop between like those that represent us and those that are represented, then they're taking that in their hands. And it's pretty obvious that 5G was forced upon us, even if the frequencies that are used right now, you know, the two ISM frequencies, 2.4 and 5.8, aren't necessarily as bad as like 100 gigahertz, 200 gigahertz, but 75 gigahertz has been used in radar for a long time, right? Like satellites have been using, you know, 75, 100 gigahertz. I mean, these frequencies are not new to us, right?
We could say we've been doing a lot of things that are bad for a long time. Like, oh, they've been putting fluoride in the water since 1940, but like,
you know, if you look at like the health aspects of it, like I know there's a lot of fear with the health of 5G and everything. Health-wise, we're already pretty much like we're already being bombarded with tons of different frequencies. So like you're gonna have much of a delta or a change in that, right? But you know, I mean, if you don't want it the way that they're, you know, displaying it with like the towers and the blah, like, you know, that definitely like is not something that I definitely support. But that's why we're working on kind of like an anti-5G network where...
Well, let's get into what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so part of the issues I see is like EMF, electromagnetic force, or like... Yeah,
frequency?
No, electromagnetic force, EMF. So when that... How should I say it? EMF is not bad, right? I mean, over 100 watts, it's going to start cooking your tissue, right? It heats everything up. That's how a microwave oven works. It's not the frequency of the microwave oven. Those are using 2.4 gigahertz. It's just the intensity, the power that cooks it, right? But you have also frequencies, right? Like, if you've ever heard a piano that's out of tune, right? You try to play it and you're just like, oof, you know, like the frequencies aren't harmonized, because what's happening is like, instead of the waves kind of harmonizing like this together, they're kind of like bouncing off each other in a way, and that's called destructive wave interference. So if you think of our bodies having these natural bioelectric signals, right, as operating, and then you start getting bombarded with this unnatural frequency, it's going to start to create a dissonance with your bioelectrical system, right, which over an extended period of time, that can be not so good, right? But that's why we're working with different harmonic offsets, right? So 432 hertz is 432 cycles per second. Is actually the original A, fourth octave A, that we used to tune to. Stradivarius violins and cellos were some of the most.
And I don't know anything about music, so I'm just gonna nod my head and say.
Yeah, I'm gonna loop it back into everything. Like, 432 hertz is the resonant tune of Stradivarius violins and violas and cellos. So those are some of the most sought after instruments in the world, right? And they had a resonant tune of 432. If you look at the way the mathematics works, 4 plus 3 plus 2 is 9, then the lower harmonic 216, 9, then the lower 108, 954, 927, 9, right? It's all 9. It fits in this perfect harmonic pattern if you do numerological deduction. If you do 440 like we have now, it goes 8, 4, 2, 1. And it's not that type of pattern, right? So you can see different like
patterns. Does it line up with like the gematria of it too, or is that?
Yeah, it's cool because it actually, so the number of seconds in one orbital cycle of Earth ends up being the wavelength of a really low, if you do 1 over that number of seconds, you get a really, really low frequency. And then if you just multiply that frequency by 2 enough times, because you multiply it by 2 to increase your octave, right? So if you go from a C to a C, the next octave C, what's happening is the frequency is doubling, right? It's twice the frequency, and then the next one is twice the frequency again, and twice the frequency again. So if you keep multiplying this frequency, you end up at a C in a 432 harmonic series, right? You end up with a lower C. So Earth,
C's get degrees.
Our orbit around the sun actually lines up and resonates with 432 hertz, right? And that also resonates with music and all these other things, which is really interesting. So we're experimenting.
It's exactly why the bad guys don't want you to flourish, because you'd be offsetting all their bad work.
You're creating constructive wave interference, where if you think about, instead of de-amplifying and detuning people, you can use communication frequencies to retune people, right? You can create harmonics that are beneficial to our body, right? They're not like an out-of-tune piano, because right now we're walking around in just like out-of-tune music everywhere, like the sounds.
For those of us that are even walking around and not still stuck in our houses.
Yeah. And I mean, the television, all the frequencies, all that we're being bombarded with, all these frequencies are just a storage mechanism for information, right? So when I say you're bombarded with all these frequencies, you're being bombarded with information, right? Different types of information that may not be healthy information, right? Like consuming food. You want to eat healthy food because you're consuming healthy information. It's information.
And they can even do things with like the flicker rates of TVs and television.
Oh yeah, and they use
like comatose states.
They use like 27 hertz, and if you look at police lights, those frequencies that they use are highly tuned to elicit fear out of you, right? Like it looks kind of like wasps swarming if you look at the way, and it's meant to create like a stress, right? And they want you to be a little bit more stressed so that you're like less on your game, right? So that whole thing kind of like, you know, these frequencies are bombarding. So we're in a really bad song right now, right? Like it's just this terrible orchestra. Everybody's out of tune. The conductor is out of time. And it's just like, and they're trying to play and everybody's playing their own thing. And it's just like, that's the world we live in right now. So that's why it's more difficult.
Sampling all these other crappy artists with all these other tyrannical plans.
Exactly. And that's why it's more difficult for you to like stay tuned, right? If you like meditate a lot or you do yoga or things like that, you know, we have to, or work out, we have to do these things to keep in tune because we're being bombarded.
Even that phrase, stay tuned. Like,
stay tuned.
Stay tuned into their
into their programming. The program will be right back, right? Blah. Human minds are similar to computers, right? Like, I mean, it can be programmed. Programming is just the definition of the informational processing system, right? Like our brain is an informational processing system. So is a computer, right? And you're giving instructions to the computer, aka computer program, to process the information in a certain way. That's what TV is doing. It's instructing you to believe things a certain way.
Like our DNA is information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you start using harmonics that are constructive, right? Then you flip that on its head, where instead of me going out and constantly being bombarded and having to meditate and like to keep myself at this high vibration, the world around me lifts me up rather than breaks me down, right? So we can encode that through the communication system utilizing like 432 offsets pattern and stuff. Now, just to be clear, I don't have actual scientific evidence of benefits of using 432 hertz offset patterns. It's something that we've decided to utilize rather than base 10 offset patterns because it makes more sense using something that's harmonic with the natural earth. It also vibrates with the Schumann frequency of 7.83 hertz is another harmonic.
Can you explain the Schumann frequency?
Earth has, so as you know, lightning, we got lightning. It goes up and down actually. And
not the lightning network, but no.
Yeah, not the lightning network. Well, it kind of does.
Okay.
But it goes.
And I wish
down.
we had this other camera working. I just had this other third camera, and anyway, so we're gonna get the wider shot on you because the other one's kind of frozen. But Colin is the first ever in studio guest that we have here at the new place.
Yeah, and we gotta christen it out, man.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that I could have asked, but you know what?
I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate it as well. And about to head to New York, actually. Well, speaking of New York, flying out there tomorrow night, taking the red eye, and then going up to Boston and Fork Fest.
Nice.
Then heading out to Anarcho Vegas, Crypto Vegas in middle July, which Aaron actually did send me a message, Aaron Nakamoto, and wanted to see if you're interested in becoming a speaker at Crypto Vegas. So
when?
I think it's like July either 19th or 20th in Vegas.
I'm down.
Cool. Well, I'll let her know that you're down. And I mean, tickets right now for those of you who are watching, I mean, it's like, to go to the conference, you get tickets for like $20, and then, but you can also fly there for next to nothing now. It is, so if you're on the East Coast and like, hey, this could be the time. So, take advantage of the fact that everyone's too scared to do anything. And, just go out there. And if you're going to be at Pork Fest or Fork Fest or any of these other places, don't be afraid to say hi or hit me up, and then it'd be cool. Anyways, I forgot we're going to the Schumann frequency.
Yeah, so the Earth, think of the Earth, it has a magnetic field, right? We know about that. That protects us from solar radiation, many different things. You have the ozone layer, but Earth is an extremely electrified system, right? Planet, and there's this frequency, right, between the upper ionosphere, which kind of acts like a plate and a capacitor, and the ground, right? And this vibration has been called the Schumann frequency. It was named after Alfred Schumann or something, sometime in, I think, the mid 20th century. But it was originally discovered by Nikola Tesla when he was experimenting with Zenit ground waves, right? With the Tesla Tower and stuff like that. And he started noticing, wait, there's this weird interference frequency going on when I'm doing all this wireless stuff. And he found the Schumann, right? He didn't know what it was back then. And since, the discovery of
he was sending electricity wirelessly back then. I mean, wasn't
at least through, that's called the Zenit ground wave. So The reason the tower is tall is because it has to be 1/2 of the wavelength of the frequency. So he's using about 12.5 megahertz, which ends up being about a 40-meter wavelength. So the tower had to be 20 meters because it shoots it out at phase. But a zenith ground wave is pretty interesting because when you're passing, well, I'll do Schumann first, and then I'll get to zenith ground waves. So there's this vibration, right? There's this vibration of the Schumann frequency, and that vibrates in all of our brain cavities, and it's usually been about 7.83 hertz. But since the 1980s, that has been on the rise. It's been increasing. Now, I mean, we're spiking at 100 hertz certain times.
And it's like the Earth's natural frequency.
The natural frequency of the planet. Yeah. So the whole planet's frequency is increasing, right? Like, and as you notice, like, feels like there's less time and things like that.
Which then helps keep everybody out of tune, and then probably keeps them in this almost like paranoid anxiety state. Or
no, the Schumann frequency is totally a natural frequency.
No, I mean the Schumann's good, but the new higher resonating frequency that Schumann's morphed into, is that
no, it's good. It's
good. Okay.
Well, so the increase in the Schumann frequency is actually increasing the vibration of our consciousness, of our brain waves, right? Brain waves are usually around like 7-8 hertz, right? And the increasing in that.
I'll nod my head and say right, but I don't really know. But so,
yeah, something around there. Like, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but I think like there's alpha and beta and gamma, and it's somewhere like 10, 20, 30 hertz, right? So the increase in the Schumann frequency is actually elevating, right? As you're noticing more people are waking up or becoming aware of things. This is partially due to the Schumann frequency increasing, right? And the Schumann frequency is actually kind of doing this plunging thing now, right? Where it'll shoot up to like 100 hertz and then it'll plunge down to like 50 and shoot up. And I mean, if you think of a toilet plunger, right? Like a toilet bowl plunger where you're forcing the water up and down, it's a similar type of concept with what Schumann's doing. So think of it as just the earth kind of like shaking things up a little bit.
Just thinking of like the elite like shoving a bunch of shit down our
they're trying, but they can't stop. That's what's really, really awesome about what's happening now is there's a lot of things far beyond their power, I guess you could say. Like we tend to maybe over glorify them. I call them the powers that were. Their powers just, I mean, not the powers that be. Yeah, and I mean, there's way more powerful forces than them. I mean, they've spent 2 millennia building all these, empires on the mother's face, and all it
prison
takes.
Planets, yeah.
Well, yeah, and all it takes is just a little bit of, whoa, there goes my continent, and then thousands of years of your so-called like genius.
And they're losing it on the monetary system right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just look at all the crazy shit that's gone on since the last time you were over at my place.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I mean, literally, not even 24 hours since when, and you were at my
that
place
was
like
right
like a month and a half ago. The next day, the oil went negative.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's just like, oh, you can't get into Bitcoin because it could go to zero, and then at least Bitcoin wouldn't go to negative. Like,
yeah, you can't trade.
I'm paying you to take this off my hands.
Yeah,
I was trying to do the conservative thing and go into oil futures.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy what's happening. So the Schumann frequency, like if you've noticed, like you'll feel like super happy, and then all of a sudden you'll feel this, and then like all this. It's in a way, it's the earth kind of plunging and cleansing all that stuff out of us, right? Because we still have all that residual information in us, all the stuff we've absorbed, the anger, the blah, right? And that stuff needs to come out, right? Because like in order to inhabit and create a viable future, we just can't be carrying that poison, the toxic crap with us, right? We have to be carrying forward like positive things, right? Like, and part of that growth. So the Schumann frequency is symbolic, and it's also a physical, how should I say, it's something we could physically measure, and there's evidence to support it, right? And showing like these effects and how it's affecting all of us, right? Now, even the full moon causes effects to people. Like if you learn to start looking at these cycles, you start to understand, oh, well, market volatility, and this is a well-known fact, goes up during a full moon cycle, right? Because the full moon actually creates slight disturbances in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. Its gravitational field modulates our magnetic field, right? And those slight ripples and modulations in the magnetic field actually cause slight ripples in all of our consciousness. And so people that are a little bit looser, right, emotionally, are going to end up having more emotional outbursts around full moons. That's where the term lunatic came from.
Yeah.
It's lunar, right? And it's very well-known fact at mental hospitals that you watch your back during a full moon because the loonies get a little bit more loony. Loony, lunatic,
Only
loony.
time I've ever been in car accidents were on full moons
Full
where
moon.
people ran
Yeah.
into me.
Yeah. You got
knock
to
on
be.
wood over here. I say only time, but yeah. So.
Yeah, and you got to be careful. So when you start to
Friday
understand,
the 13th too. It was Friday the 13th and
Yeah,
a full moon.
there you go.
Yeah, the first car accident, and then my wife, will feature ex-wife, recently got into one on the full moon we just had
Oh,
like
yeah?
a week and a half ago.
Yeah, that was
but-
I think a lunar eclipse too. I think maybe.
And I know the
2
other one we
moons
got
ago.
into was like the blood moon, super moon, like
Yeah,
all sorts
yeah.
of things, coming together. And then also the harvest moon, like you wait to the full moon. Or is that just a full moon, or is a harvest moon like a special?
I think a harvest moon is the October moon or something, and it's like slightly more yellow or something, and it's
And that's when
symbolic
you-
of the time when you harvest the food or something.
Because
like
it's
that.
also like the moon is then also then helping pull, like the gravitational pull is and helping pull like the nutrients even like out of the ground. Well, not that there's a lot of nutrients in the ground left, but hypothetically that's what they would do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy how so many things are just tied to these other.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about the universe, right? Like, let's say space-time continuum. Think of it like the ocean, right? You're just this big suspended ocean, right? It's like a fluid type thing. We'll call it the ether. Or like, I don't like using the word ether because Ethereum ruined it all. Right? I mean, ether actually is a word from a theory from the early 1900s that actually Nikola Tesla was really involved in. If you research Nikola Tesla, you find that he sent some letters to Albert Einstein. He was completely offended by Einstein's theory because it neglected the ether. It neglected the substance of space, right? So Einstein was correct in certain aspects of his determination. I mean, the space-time curve, the curvature of space-time around gravitational fields.
Too bad it wasn't like Twitter back then. See those two shit talking back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
Tesla and
Yeah, I
Einstein.
mean, Einstein though was like, I mean, he's another one of those but so Nikola Tesla was really, and I mean, now if we look at practical applications of different people's understanding of the material universe, right? Einstein's practical application was nuclear bombs, right? And that's where Einstein is known for, is he helped perfect the fission process using plutonium implosion weapons, right? Which one could say
Thank
is
you for that.
yeah, that's one could say that's a feat and something amazing, and the other could say the whole equation E equals mc squared is all about nuclear bombs, right? It's about nuclear physics. Energy equals mass.
Well, if you need us to wipe off the whiteboard behind you, I guess we could always.
No, I mean it's easy. C represents the speed of light. That's just a constant for the speed of light. So energy E equals m mass times the speed of light squared. So in other words, a little bit of mass equals a lot of energy, right? The speed of light squared is a big number. So any little teeny bit of mass multiplied by that is lots of energy, right? So that equation is just showing the equivalence of matter and energy and showing that you can destroy matter, aka a nuclear bomb, to create energy, right?
That
Now,
technically only be one line of code then.
yeah. So
very important line of code. Yeah.
so Einstein's whole foundation is based around this and like relativity and whatever, which like has been proven. The speed of light has actually been measured faster than what he said was possible, right? So they're starting to find and then you got quantum and all this other stuff. So Tesla was into this whole medium, right? So coming back full circle, you have, if you imagine like space, or the space-time continuum is kind of like this ocean. You're underwater in this ocean. Now, if you, Tim, let's say, swim over next to me, what's going to happen, right? You're going to create ripples in this water, which are going to travel. And like, if I'm just sitting here, let's say meditating, I'm going to feel a whoop, I'm going to feel a bump, right? Or like these fields are all interacting, and these energy moves through these mediums and connects together. So think about like a planet, like a rock or a moon, and as these things are moving through this medium, it's causing all these ripplation patterns that are all interacting with other ripplation patterns, including our own, and thus then we get this experience, right?
Ripple's rooting that word too. Ripplation patterns.
I know.
Ripple and
Seriously.
Everything is not meant to be puns over here. And I try not to swim next to people meditating. I try to have some decency over here.
Yeah, so that's how all these fields start working, and the moons and the Schumann frequency, and then like that's where astrology comes in with the planets and everything, right? Like right now we have Jupiter and Pluto having conjunctions, which hasn't happened for 2,000 years, right? The last time there was major conjunctions with Pluto, which
What do you mean by conjunction?
So it sits kind of like this, where it hits, like you have an opposition and then you have a conjunction where they're kind of next to each other, right? So the last time Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn had 3 conjunctions like this, and then finally a great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn at the December 21st. The last time was about 2,000 years ago, right? And Pluto represents destruction, right? As soon as the first conjunction happened, it was actually early April. Oil, economy collapses, civil unrest, peak of the pandemic, right? Then
I get divorced.
now we're coming up on the next. Yeah, I mean you got divorced, exactly. There's a lot of divorces happening too, which is good. Then you get the next conjunction end of June, right? June 28th. So we have a couple weeks running up to that. And, the planets kind of came out of retrograde a little bit ago, and then all of a sudden riots start happening, right? And then I think we're going to see the economy.
Good. I'll be at Pork Fest then for June 28th. So at least by then I'll be surrounded by 1,000 other libertarians. So
Hell yeah, man.
Shit goes down. At least I've got some backup.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't say like shit's gonna go down. I mean, the first conjunction really set off like how everything is going to materialize, right? Which I saw economic turmoil. I saw pork industries getting destroyed, right? I mean, we're going to be seeing more indictments. We're going to be seeing more civil unrest. Like, I mean, and with the pork stuff, like you're not even then allowed to even, like I was talking to a guy out in actually New Hampshire, Massachusetts border, and he was saying that, he was offering to go buy up these hogs, but he said no, because of the deals they had with Tyson and Purdue that you actually have to kill these pigs. You can't just go and sell them to somebody else. But I'll have to have that guy on as a guest because he's fascinating. But, it's crazy. But so this Pluto-Jupiter conjunctions, right? We have a final one November 17th, and then we have a final Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the end of the year. So interesting enough, I've been just watching the planets a little bit more than I usually do this year, and they've been lining up pretty significantly. So if each one of these planets is like a different object in the sea, right, and as they're moving, they're creating ripples, and that's interacting with all of us, right? And when the planets get close to each other, their energies are amplified with one another when there's a conjunction, and they're amplified in a certain way. And Pluto is the planet of destruction, right? When also the way it works.
Is it still a planet these days? I don't know. They're always
yeah. And the farther out the planet is too in the solar system, the stronger influence it's going to have on us, right? Just because of its orbital pattern. So the last time that I saw some pretty significant Pluto conjunctions was 1965 and 66. Where there was 3 Uranus and Pluto conjunctions, right? Which back then, like the foundation of rock and roll, that was the starting of kind of this shifting into a new age. What the new age means is just you have a polar star, and there's a precession of the equinox, which means our polar star points to a different constellation every 2,000 years, right? Now we're coming out of Pisces and into Aquarius, right? So the transitionary time is about 100 years, right? And the Piscean age was about secrecy and that's why we have so many secret societies, secret knowledge, occult, blah, blah, blah. And then Aquarius is about innovation and freedom and expression, right? It's the bringer of water. So this really started off in like the early 50s with rock and roll. That started breaking down the religion and all that, all these institutions, right? And then it's complemented in 1965 and 66 where there was massive protests, Black Lives, right? There was the freedom movements with Martin Luther King. There was the Beatles. There was John Lennon saying they're more popular than Jesus. And there's like riots from churches.
I was like, you go to MLK. Okay, he was taken up by the FBI. Then Lennon probably also taken up by the FBI.
yeah. And so there's all these things right now. These 3 conjunctions that happen in 65, 66 between Pluto and Uranus. Uranus is the planet that rules Aquarius, right? So that was like a huge stepping in beginning of the cultural revolution that is the age of Aquarius, right? And that's why the hair, they say dawning on the age of Aquarius, right? So then you get down to now where we have these Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunctions. Saturn is structure, right? And Jupiter is philosophical beliefs, and then Pluto is destruction. So the structures and philosophical structures of the system are dissolving, right? And every time these conjunctions come through, it's like, think of these massive gravitational fields that are acting upon all these other fields. And these massive planets, Jupiter and Saturn are huge planets. A number out of my rectal file, I think I recall 500 to 1,000 times like Earth could fit in like Saturn and Jupiter. These are just massive planets, and their gravitational fields are interacting with us, right? Like gravity acts instantaneously, right? At a distance, it doesn't travel. Gravity waves are just this kind of like quantum entanglement. They just happen. It's just boom, gravity's acting on this object 1,000,000 miles away. It doesn't need to travel, right? So all these fields are interacting with it, and they're coming around, and then you got these conjunctions, and it's cool to see like how the planets and everything are interacting with this, right? And how it's all kind of like flowing together in this mix of changes. So it's like, on the more cosmic perspective, there's a lot of like really important things that are shifting right now. And, you know, it in one hand is the end of the world. It's the end of that world. It's the end of that way of doing things, right? And that's why there was all this like Armageddon or end times or, you know,
but
the
now
Mayan
do you
calendar.
see people like Google and all these other tech giants who are now, they can see that the things are shifting and now they want to take this. I mean, because really what Google is, I mean, if you go and you take the collective consciousness of everybody searching for stuff and doing things on their own, you can then become this AI in of itself that can then predict the future, and then they know, then the powers that were then know where the future is going, and then they then hijack it, and maybe they don't need to fully take it over, but they can steer that ship and just like a tiny bit this way. And
this is what's so fun about what's happening right now, man, is they can't predict what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, right? Like, I think there's a lot more spontaneous things happening that are outside of the realm of the predictions. And AI is a purely logical construct, right? If we look at like planes, right? Planes of the mind, let's say. You start with the first, right? Word. Vibration, right? There's just a word. It's a point. It's a vibrating word. Then the next is association. You associate this word with this object, right? Cup, word, association, right? Then the third is reflection, right? I now have this association, and then I reflect that association back upon myself and do self-reflection, right? That's third plane. Then from that, you get to logic, right? Where after reflection, you can create logical sequences and constructs.
Well, I see them breaking that down because now you have these words that the words don't really mean what they used to mean, or they then...
Big igloo, like backyard barbecue, right? Like the boogaloo stuff, right? Like that's the meme wars.
Or anything. I mean, it's almost like when it's up is down, down is up type world.
Yeah, and so the AIs really can only extend like word association, reflection, and logic.
Or like even
right?
like the swastika used to be like this
peace.
Like a peace Buddhist, and I've also heard some people say that the peace sign was like sort of like a sign for like destruction. They've then turned into a sign of good, and they've taken the sign of good and turned it into a sign of evil.
Oh, they like to do that.
And then they take what is conservative, and then I mean there's nothing really conservative about quote unquote conservatives, and they take liberal. And today's version of liberal, there's nothing that's liberal about that. And so
I mean, like here's one, Anut Corpus, right?
Yeah.
The pyramid with the all-seeing eye. That is actually an ancient symbol that symbolizes the third eye, right?
Yeah, so maybe we can get it up into that camera over there. So
yeah.
Let's see if we can go. Oh, let's do it. Let's try to. I mean, everyone's seen what a dollar bill looks like. Let's see. There we go. Boom.
Yeah, so that
next time come with 100. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, that's the symbol of the third eye, but they put it on these bills, right, to make it seem like it's bad because part of the Illuminati's agenda is.
And then the fluoride then also affects your third eye, pineal gland.
Pineal gland, yeah, it calcifies your pineal gland, right? So they've made these like occult symbologies, right? And they really are ancient symbols that mean different things, right? Your third eye is just your chakra, right?
So
but they try to make
pyramid
it
isn't necessarily bad, but then they associate it with Illuminati stuff, and then it becomes anything.
Then it becomes, then people are like, oh my gosh, the all-seeing eye, pyramid, oh, terrible, evil, scary, right? Oh, bad Illuminati, blah. And so it allows, it keeps people from this, because like the Illuminati is really into this occult symbology and stuff because they understand the mechanisms of the universe, the vibrational physics. That's why we're in such dissonant frequencies, right? They created that on purpose. It's another form of control grid that keeps you at a lower frequency or a lower awareness, and that lower awareness prevents you from becoming aware that you are self-enslaving, right?
Then on all the social media platforms, they got everybody to show solidarity for Black Lives Matter by putting this like black square, black cube on their profile, and like black cube is like of Saturn is like one of the most satanic symbols there is, which I don't know a ton about that, but and that's only recently kind of come on my radar.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're saying like they're predicting in their AI and whatever, right? The AI only works like up to the 4 planes, right? 4 planes. But the 5th plane is spontaneity. A lot of art comes from that. It's like, why did you do this? I don't know. It just spontaneously came. I just felt like doing it. And it just came, right? And a lot of the core of human creativity comes from that spontaneity, right? That just materialized. I don't know. And, AIs, They can't predict spontaneity because it's out of the realm of
Can't
logic.
predict Bitcoin being invented one day. I mean,
Yeah.
changing the game. So you're on this whole paradigm, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
you see the paradigm gets shifted, and now you're seeing, the Pentagon even talking about. And actually, I got new capabilities over here, so we can go to the screen. But let me see if this actually. I might need to switch my screen a little bit here to get this to fit right. So if you guys bear with me, but it does say Pentagon documents revealed that the U.S. has planned for a Bitcoin rebellion. And it basically goes on to say, imagine a world where Generation Z rebellion that uses Bitcoin to undermine and evade the establishment. And in the Pentagon war game, young people born between the 1990s and early 2010s use cyber attacks to steal money and convert it to Bitcoin. And these are war games that the 2018 Joint Land, Air, and Sea Strategic Special Program, or JLAS, set up this war game going back to, this is fictionally set in 2025 and intended to reflect a plausible depiction of major trends and influences in the world. And, it's sort of crazy that you've got, they're calling it the Zebellion, that you're seeing that this is, what's on, front and center in, the Pentagon's, wargaming.
Yeah, and I mean, they're saying that too, just as a form of conditioning people's psychology to start accepting Bitcoin as a more mainstream instrument, because I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier. I think we got sidetracked on a tangent like we usually do. We had the OUR Bitcoin. If you look there, Bitcoin and tulips and Bitcoin's dead, and right then after 2014, right, is when the mainstream started saying 2014 is the year Bitcoin grew up and became not a Wild West, right? That's when they started trying to regulate it. And that is when Blockstream appears, right? This company that comes to save Bitcoin and blah, 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 and segregated witness and lightning and yada, yada.
Speaking of Illuminati and Bilderberg.
Yeah, if you look at the formations of it, the chairman of the Bilderberg Group owns an investment company called AXA Ventures, and AXA Ventures put 80...
Henry DeCastries, and by coincidence, the very first company I've ever interviewed for was AXA. Just by coincidence. Really? And I actually gave my AXA shirt or sweatshirt to Tone Vase to try to troll him, except then Tone ended up liking it. And I'm like, damn it, it's supposed to...
Well, that would be Tone.
And then he ended up liking it. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, so Blockstream was funded about $80 million from that. So then you have the Scaling Bitcoin,
and he was also chair of the Bilderberg Committee. I think 4 or 5 times, or from 2014 to 2018, and again last year randomly or something.
And then you see Ethereum, right? Then we see Ethereum come out, and they've got this promise of whatever they do, the DAO. I think the DAO hack was probably some sort of sponsored attack or some sort of person trying to reveal their true colors. But I noticed after that, after they showed that they were willing to compromise on principles of decentralization, that's when the banks got interested. If you notice,
Ethereum Enterprise Alliance.
That's when it started, right? Is after they got co-opted, right? Or after they showed that they would fork the protocol. And then they're like, oh, okay, well, now we can just go take over Vitalik. And I mean, Vitalik didn't even code Ethereum. If you look, he's the puppet. He's a weird kid looking weird enough that they can make him a puppet to make everybody think he's a genius.
Sounds like Mark Zuckerberg. I don't buy the Zuckerberg story for 1 second at all.
Zuckerberg's.
I mean, you get into LifeLog, and then LifeLog was the CIA. The CIA put out basically a government contract saying, "Hey, we'd like to create this." Basically, it was like the blueprint for Facebook. And then the day Facebook was launched was the day LifeLog then pulled its application from the government system. But then what you're talking about, the DAO, just so people at home know, it's this whole, I mean, I don't want to get into all the inside baseball weeds of it, well, because I can't, but basically it's essentially there was money that was stolen in Ethereum, and then what they ended up doing was saying, okay, we're going to basically split off the chain and make it look like that never happened before. And so one group said, hey, let's do this, another group said, hey, let's not. And then essentially now you have Ethereum Classic, which is the actual, I guess, Ethereum that had the DAO stolen from it, and then
it never overwrote. So they're everything's in a blockchain is a cryptographic structure, right? And it's everything's changed. So I try to use an example of 1 + 1 is 2, right? That's 2.
Well,
now
not in Common Core anymore.
But then if we say the equation is Z + 1 equals, F or whatever, right? So or F plus 1 equals F, right? Like kind of a bit of a fractal, right? The input's feeding it, right? So 1 plus 1 is 2. That's our first number. Then we add 1 to that. That's 3. And then, we add another to that to the 4, right? So if we change the value of 1 plus 1 is 2, that first equation, and we say 1 plus 1 is 3, it's going to break every single answer from there, because then the numbers, instead of being 4, it's going to be 5, right? So that's kind of how this chaining works. So you can't change anything in the past, right, without redoing all of the work. But what they did is they made an exception in the code to say, well, you can't change anything except for this one contract, which we explicitly put in here as a hard fork and said, this one particular contract is no longer the DAO. It is a withdrawal contract, and it always has been a withdrawal contract. And we're just going to make an exception in the rule of the cryptography and the integrity of the system just this one time, because it was a mistake and we all lost our money and yada, yada, right? And that became the DAO, which like really set a precedence, right? And so then you link in Blockstream and you have this whole agenda. Now, after 2014, the narrative of Bitcoin and tulips changed. If you noticed, Thamos, all of the Bitcoin talk and things like that, our Bitcoin eventually became RBTC because people weren't able to speak out against Blockstream, and any narrative that was against Blockstream then became the evil one, right? Instead of Bitcoin and tulips, right? Because they co-opted it, and that's when it started really gaining notoriety. And they then from there created the scaling issue with the scaling Bitcoin conferences, and they rejected. And then finally, after a bunch of debating and whatever, they wanted segregated witness because they needed that to create the Lightning Network. There was a lot of people that didn't want the Lightning Network, but they finally agreed to do SegWit 2x, which says we'll give you SegWit if you give us a 2 megabyte block size, right? They said, okay, like we'll do this agreement. They got SegWit and they said, sorry, we're not going to increase the block size.
This is like right around the time that I met you, because I think we were on Ernie's show. It was like August, probably 2017.
Yeah,
and
this was right around that time. Yeah, and they refused to do it, right? Which is the reason there's multiple Bitcoins and multiple Ethereums is the direct result of centralized decision making, right? It's just it doesn't matter if you believe Blockstream's good or bad. The bottom line is that there was centralized decision making, and a large part of the community was extremely upset. That's the only reason Bitcoin Cash exists, and they believe that Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. And there is a large enough volume of people believing in Bitcoin Cash that it still has a large market cap. It's not something like you can't just fork Bitcoin and make it a $10 billion protocol unless you have people supporting it. So there's a large amount of Bitcoiners that support Bitcoin Cash, right? Now, if you look at it too, now the next aspect that they created was Bitcoin maximalism, right? Because when you create this tribal maximalist mentality, then nothing else can threaten Bitcoin, because you need to eliminate all the competition from threatening your co-opt, right? And so they have to deliberately make the technology inept to create the problem that they can come save us from.
A Galilean dialectic of problem, reaction,
and
solution.
That's generally the how should I say it? The way that these types of people function is they create problems, and then they come through and they save you from the problems that they created. And then it's just
telling the government, hey, we've broken your leg, and here's
exactly, we've broken your legs, but we're gonna give you $50 so you can go get a Band-Aid.
Oh, speaking of give you $50, did you hear that? I think I read somewhere where, and I haven't verified this, but I know that they're talking about there's 35 million people who haven't gotten their stimulus checks now. And so what they're proposing for the stimulus checks is that now they're going to actually give those 35 million who hadn't gotten their $1,200 yet, that was going to be through a Fed dollar that was going to be a Bitcoin type dollar. Because now, did you hear the initial proposal?
The digital dollar, the $2 trillion 1 mint coins, UBI.
Yeah.
And this is another agenda that, during economic turmoil. So if you look at the history of the Federal Reserve, it was instituted in 1913. As soon as it was instituted, they did World War I. World War I destabilized the Ottoman Empire, it destabilized the Russian royalty, which created the foundations for the Soviet Union, right? And it also created the Treaty of Versailles.
Woodrow Wilson said that he would not get us into World War I, and
exactly.
he got us right in there. So.
Yep. And so then they actually signed the Treaty of Versailles, right, at the end of World War I. Now, also, let's look what else happened in 1917 during World War I. There was the H1N1 pandemic. sound familiar, right? It started out in early year 1917, where a small group of soldiers got sick on a military base, and then it just disappeared.
Is this the Spanish flu that you're talking about?
The Spanish flu, yeah. And then then I think 6 months passed, and then came autumn, people started dropping like flies, right? Because it spread all over the world because of the war. The American soldiers they infected their own soldiers, and then got the soldiers to go infect the rest of the world.
Wasn't the Black Lives Matters protest?
No. So 30 to 50 million people ended up dying from H1N1, right? And they had some pretty strict, stringent, controls put on people. So I always say to people when it comes to like this pandemic, right? There was a pandemic angle to it, but I think it's a reactive pandemic. Proactive pandemic would be you need a war to destabilize world economies to create the global financial reset, because fiat currency has historically only lasted about 34 years.
I think the plan was to get into a war with Russia. And
exactly, in 2016.
And have Hillary in there. The game plan was to get into a war with
Then
Russia.
do the pandemic in 2020, right? After the wars progressed very far, you have nukes, you have, terrible, horrible things happening. And then at the peak of the fear, you release a pandemic that's really deadly, that scares the shit out of people, pardon my language, and gets everyone to start, self-isolating and self-enslaving because of their own fear, and then, social distance. And it would have worked if we were in a wartime, right? People would have been already so inundated with the fear. Then the pandemic hits at the same time. Everyone's, please save us, government.
You even have like the patriots who would then lay down and be like, oh, it's just for the good of the government.
It's good of the government, good of the people, America, right? So they needed this war, right, historically with pandemic to really do impact. So, I mean, if we look 100 years ago, history repeats itself. 1916 is around, I think World War I started a little early, but we got involved around that time, right? 100 years, 2016, that was the year they were trying as hard as they could to really get that war started. But the thing is, ever since Trump was elected, they've been playing reactive, right? They haven't been able to be proactive because they've been reacting to everything Trump. They've been having to attack him with all of the media. He's out of control. He's not a puppet, all these different things. And then the economies are collapsing too. So the reason they needed this war too is you need a war.
I did buy a signed Trump hat before the election, thinking that he would win. So then I thought he was going to get offed, and then it'd be worth even more money. Not that I was hoping that, but that's what I'm kind of surprised.
I'm happy he's still alive and going, man. Like, I mean, I'm not necessarily into politics, but I'm just happy that there's somebody in power that's not a puppet, right?
I mean, even if he's still doing some bad stuff, it's like, well, at least it's not like, at least
he's
messing
just
with the Clintons and messing with
other
bad people.
And so you needed this. So 100 years later, we needed this destabilization of world economies, because historically fiat currencies, like on average, last about 30 years. The longest lasting fiat currency is the pound. That's actually been, I think, 300 years, right? That they've been able to manage to keep that thing afloat, but it's lost like 99.5% of its value, right? I mean, it's
then
just,
you take a look at who owns the Federal Reserve, and more than likely it's probably people connected to British royalty that own the Federal
Rothschilds.
I mean, the very first central bank was openly owned by the British. The second one was open. I mean,
the City of London. Yeah.
I mean, the first one it ended in 1812, and the British came down here and, pardon my language, burned down the fucking White House. That's why they burned. And you know what? There's so many crazy things going on. I don't care about even language at this point. It's like there's so many. It's like if you're not offended by the fact we're in like this slave grid Federal Reserve system, but you're mad at me dropping an F-bomb, that's me, and qualifying
to
you.
To add to the whole British thing too, a lot of people I don't think are fully aware of what happened after the Civil War. The Civil War wasn't about slavery. Slavery was already abolished before the Civil War. It was about seceding from the North, the Union from the federal government, right? And if you listen to the Gettysburg Address, it actually addresses everything that they've done now, which is creating a hyper strong federal government to create central control over the decentralized states. And the Virginia Company, which was the original company that owned the colonies from, back in the day, was actually just renamed to United States of America. And then another company was established called the United States of America Army, right? And if you look, your birth certificate is representation of your employment in the U.S. corporation, right? So it is literally a giant farm corp. And that's why they can take your children away, because you are a debtor. You are owned. That's why you can't kill yourself, right? It's illegal because you're damaging government property, because you're born as property. But there's other ways to circumvent that through this form called the UCC-1, I believe, where you can elevate yourself from a debtor to a creditor, right? And you claim your property like your children, and they can't take your children from you after that, right? It's like a backdoor in the system that they need to have, legal loopholes, right? But I mean, that's all going away anyway. But like, so you need, see, these fiat currencies were designed, the US dollar particularly was only designed to last about 100 years, right? So they needed another war in 2016.
Well, even Lincoln even said, there's a quote of him saying, "I have an army in front of me, that's the South, and I have an army of European central bankers at my rear, and I far more fear the army at my rear." Then you had, the Second Central Bank of America with Andrew Jackson. Both guns, a guy tried to assassinate him. Both guns at point blank range misfired.
Yep.
He said that it was wealthy Europeans that put him up to it. And essentially, I mean, you have, and even like the Rothschild family, like that's not even like their real name. So their real name was actually Bauer. They had teamed up with the Oppenheimer family. The Oppenheimer family was like, hey, instead of lending money to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, it's much more beneficial to lend money to governments. And so they got money from basically this prince that wanted them, this German prince, to invest into English bonds.
Yep.
And then instead of investing in the English bonds, they sat in the money, found out Napoleon had lost, spread a rumor saying Napoleon had won.
They did that. Yeah, they created, because they were funding both sides. One was funding Napoleon, one was funding Britain. Yeah.
And then when they found out that the rumor wasn't real, by then
they
British
had bought
stock
up all the bonds.
They'd
Yeah.
already bought it. Well, they basically bought the entire stock market
Yeah.
and the bonds, and then they gave back the German prince the money that they should have. And now at the time, Germany, I think, was into like several different areas. It wasn't just like one unified German. And then the shield in their door was a red shield, and that's how the Bauer family became Rothschild, because red shield in German was Rothschild family.
There you go.
And then they sent all the sons to the different banking centers.
Yep.
And now then they teamed up with the royal family, with the royal family to help start the Bank of England. And then if you trace back the roots of the royal family, before they were in England, they were in Germany. Then before Germany, they were in Transylvania, and then Romania area. And then you do know who like their direct descendants of. This sounds like absolutely crazy.
No, I'm not sure.
Oh man, dude, I'm about to blow your mind.
Oh yeah,
let's do this. And please call me out on this, because this sounds ridiculous. And you guys can go. There are videos that I can even show you of Prince Charles walking around Romania, walking around Transylvania, talking about how they're direct descendants of Vladas Tepes. You know who that is, right?
No.
Fucking Dracula.
Oh.
So the royal family is literally direct descendants of.
So, yes. I mean, this is where truth gets a little stranger than fiction. You'd be surprised how many vampires there actually are. I mean, I've actually met people that are straight up vampires. They just love to suck blood from people, right? I mean, let's
go back to Google.
There's a lot more of that than you would think. And I mean, there is, how should I say it, a science behind it. I mean,
we get into like adrenochrome now, or
what? No. I mean, it's kind of an energetic side of things. So, without getting too esoteric, right? There's energy, right? Life energy. Let's just call it electromagnetic energy. And your blood contains a lot of this electromagnetic energy, right? It's kind of your aura, if you've known.
Your life force, yeah.
So your aura is kind of the lowest form of that. It's called your lower mana, right? If you've ever heard the term manifest, people are like, I'm going to manifest this. Oh, the secret, blah, blah, blah. That's, introductory understanding of like this whole mechanism. But if you think that like mana, fest, right? Festivities of mana, right? Mana is energy. So when energy is collected in a place, it brings new things into the physical, right? Science already proves that E equals MC squared. Energy and matter are equivalent. So when you take energy and you concentrate energy into a spot, it's going to physically create things, right? That's manifesting, the whole idea of manifestation. And so this mana, right, you need a source of mana to manifest, right? So if you're too blocked off from the light and you can't get a source, let's say you're just in this forest, it's just growing everything, and you're like, and you can't plant a seed because the light won't reach, you need a source of mana from someone else, right? So you get
the blue blood royalty, which that's how they got their names, because they at the time the Spanish hated the Moors and because they had invaded, and so the royalty then in Spain then basically made it so that they didn't want to be, have a nice tan like I do, so they wanted to make themselves as white as possible, and so then they were so white that their blood looked blue to their skin, and that's how the term blue blood came about. So even tying back to the elites and
and they're very well aware of these things. That's why there's like occult symbols, all seeing eye. I mean, the Treaty of Versailles was signed on the 11th hour. It was actually signed November 11th. at 11:11 a.m. and 11 seconds, right? Because 11 is a number of gateways. It's a gateway, right? It's like if you look at like 11:11, it's like a portal, right?
Is that
It's
why
an
people say
opening.
like, oh, it's 11:11, make a wish, or is that?
Yeah. 11:11 is kind of like, it just, think of it as like a gateway, right? A cosmic gateway. So 11:11, it's like an opening for a new beginning, right? So 11 is a powerful number. It's a vibration, right? Remember, everything is information, right? Vibrations carry different forms of that information. So 11 carries a specific vibration that, when utilized with dates and significant dates, it's powerful to create. So the Treaty of Versailles actually set up the economic destruction of Germany, destroyed like a lot of the Ottoman Empire, the start of the foundations of the Soviet Union.
Guaranteed World War II. I mean,
It guaranteed World War II, right? So they've known about all these things. Now, when it comes to blood, right? Mana, right, is in high concentration in the blood. The blood is a carrier of mana, right? Because the mixing of sugar, right, in your bloodstream, the blood sugars that all the food converts into, and oxygen, that mixing together is what generates this mana, right? This lower mana. So we're all generating that in our blood. That's our energy, your chi. If you study different like qigong or things like that, you can start to actually work with this energy. And like samurais know how to work with this energy, where they can just boom and do that and knock someone on their butt, like completely, right? There's tons of stuff. It's just physics, right? And the reason that it's esoteric is because it's a hidden knowledge that if we became aware of it, we wouldn't be able to be slaves, right? Because we have to create our own reality of enslavement. They cannot force us to be slaves, right? We're too powerful creatures, right?
back in the day, a lot of slaves had a lot of masks on the slaves too. Back in the day too. I mean,
so we have to believe in our own enslavement in order to be effective slaves. And to believe in our own enslavement, we have to believe that we're stupid, we're dumb, that the government's better than us, that there's other people that know more than us, that blah 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 blah, all these things. But then have the illusion that we're having, help, so like Obama with hope and change, and all these things, right? Psyops. So the roots of this vampirism really actually comes into this weird occult black magic, right? Which black magic is just utilizing mana, life energy, to create things, right? To force things to happen and willing it with your mind, right? Which is extracting that mana out of blood from people, or that's why they do weird sex rituals, and that's why they're actually into children, right? Because children have a purer, stronger mana, and they want that mana, right? They don't have a
like
source
the Red Hot Chili Peppers, something like the blood sugar sex magic or something.
Yeah, they have to steal all of that in order to do these things, right? And so that's, when you say that, it's really not that far-fetched, right? I mean, truth is stranger than fiction, and when you start to really wake up, I mean, we've grown up in this world that seems like it's the Stepford Wives, right? Everyone's happy and like, oh yeah, oh, the world's not perfect, but you try to do better. Like, trust. Oh, I tried to change the world my whole life. I just gave up. Like, it's just not gonna, like all this stuff, like all these stories, and we're in this like illusions, right? And now that these things are starting to come off, it's just like, yes, they eat babies. Yes, they.
Well, then also, I mean, let's get back. So
they root in vampirism.
I've got it's the Samsung right here, but it runs off of the Google phones run off of an Adreno processor. The browser on the Google phone would be.
It's called Adreno.
No, Chrome.
Adrenochrome, yeah. that is also another.
Then pick apart the Google symbol, and it's actually like 3 6s interwoven.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing too, though. Like 3 6s, right? 666. Carbon 12, okay, is the most stable isotope of any isotope. An isotope means it has a different combination of neutrons compared to the protons, right? The atomic number defines the element. So carbon, right, is element number 6, okay, because it's got 6 protons. Carbon 12, the isotope, is the 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. So the most stable, radioactively speaking, right, like the most stable isotope of any isotope on the periodic table is carbon 12. 666, right? So what does 666 symbolize? It symbolizes matter. It symbolizes the creation of matter, the physical world, right? 666. And if you ever look at it too, if you take 3 6s together, right? 1, 2, 3, it looks like a spinning planet, right? Like it's the numbers of matter, right? So the beast, all that stuff, it's just esoteric bullshit to just mean matter, the physical world. Boom, here we are, right? It's not necessarily evil, right? There's nothing particularly wrong with it. It's just a little bit denser and heavier, and things move a little slower here, and we forget shit when we come here, right? So, I mean, just speaking into that, now, like, these guys, like, they know about all these things, and that's what makes them such a good opponent, right? Because they have interwoven all of these different disciplines.
Can you even like watch TV or movies or stuff without being able to see? Like, I mean, it's just, I can't even watch stuff because I see it like every single place of where they're trying to put propaganda. And
I can't, dude. I don't even really listen to Pandora streaming too much anymore because I was just jamming, listening to music and coding and stuff, and then all of a sudden I hear this like, oh, dark days are gone. I was like, hey, this is a cool song. Like, I'm the dark days are gone. Yeah, like going into the light, right? And then I go and I check the lyrics, right? And it says the dog days are gone. I'm like, okay, dog days. And then I start reading the lyrics. It's by this band Florence and the Machine, right?
Yeah.
And I start reading the lyrics, and it's like, you killed me with your kisses. Your love smothered my blood. I'm just like, whoa, like, think this chick's like, I mean, I just could feel this like, whoa, like I'm feeling this really dark vibe coming off of this chick, right? And I just like do a little bit of like Florence and the Machine, Illuminati, and it's like, boom, all this occult symbology and weird things, and like I'm just like, oh my God, I can't even, like, I got to be careful.
Even then,
I'm just on like opera now. I just switched everything to opera. Like, Giacomo Puccini, like I'll stick with you. None of this modern bullshit because there's just like, dude, you never know when they're going to be slipping that stuff in, man. Like, and those frequencies.
And now who's that new one? Like Billie Eilish, like my daughter is like in love with her. And I'm like telling my wife like, oh, thanks for, and then they're like trying to talk about like all the obvious satanic symbols in there. It's like, oh, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, this is like the most insane programming.
Satanism though, man, is like, if you look at 666, 666 is the number of matter, right? And I've seen a lot of the Q people, right, especially now, are getting really weird into the satanic, like they're all Satan worshippers. It's like, chill, right? Like, if you energize things like that, you're going to make them more than they are, which is going to make your experience of those more unpleasant.
Even
right?
like the contact tracing bills are all like ending in, I think it's 4 6s, but it's like HR 166666.
Yeah.
Like.
Just think of 666 as symbolizing materialism. Okay, the devil, the evil, right? Evil is just error that's perpetuated, right? Sin means missing the mark. Like, I'm pointing there and I accidentally go that way, right? I didn't make the mark, right? Oh, yeah, nope, over this way, Colin. You're missing the mark a little bit. That's what sin means, right? If you look at the original derivation of Latin, right, in terms of it, now that word has been bastardized since then, but it just means simply an error, right? 1 + 1 is 3. No, Colin, it's 2. Oh, thanks for correcting me, Tim. But let's say you have some errors too, right? You have sins, right? And then I'm like, 1 + 1 is 3. You're like, actually, 1 + 1 is 5. I'd be like, oh, thank you. Wait, no, actually, I think 1 + 1 is 8. And you're like, no, 1 + 1 is 50. I'd be like, no, 1 + 1 is 1,000,000. And we keep going and we keep going. What's happening is we're increasing our margin of error. An error compounds upon an error if it's not corrected, right? So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and a bigger and bigger and bigger error to the point where the error becomes uncorrectable within a designated period of time, right? Like somebody's become
because now you've wrapped around, you've invested so much into a lie that was built on the foundation, a lie that now you can't unwrap, or now you've got an institution that is then, Ernie would call it Steiger's law, where you have now all of a sudden it's not about the whatever the institution was formed about, it's about the institution. So we can't take down the Catholic Church because of all the pedophiles, because now what of all the supposed good that it represents as well. So this error, right? These they who are they? Like, I like how Ernie says it. They are those who do not leave us alone, right? But they are also agents of error, right? Because error perpetuated, right? Consciousness is all referential and relative, right? Like, if there's nothing, just imagine absolute nothingness, and then all of a sudden something exists. Is this something big or small? Well, it's not anything until something else exists to measure relative against it. Now, if this thing's this big and this thing's this big, then it's small. But if it's just this, is it small or is it big? It doesn't matter, right? There is nothing until you measure it against something, right? So the same with us. We measure ourselves against each other and against the world. So if you're in error and you're always measuring yourself against error, you're going to be perpetuating the error. Or people say, are you rich? Are you wealthy?
Yeah,
it's like, well, compared to what? I mean, yeah.
And the error is over fixation on the material world, right? It's like greed is a product of trying to fill a dirt hole, right? A big hole with water. right? You're pouring water, buckets and buckets of water. Money's like the water. Materialism's like the water. What's going to happen? Well, it'll sit there for a minute, right? Oh, wait, I have a pond. I can go swim in my pond for a minute. And then, after a little bit of time, it slowly creeps away at you. So you get that temporary satisfaction. You're like, yeah, the hole's filled. Oh, wait, no, I think I need more. And you got to keep filling that hole, which keeps draining out, right? And then you start doing things to like fill it in with more water. I need more water. So you start stealing water from your neighbor and stuff. And that starts digging your hole deeper and bigger and bigger. So these people, their error, right? 666, the error, the evil, whatever you want to call it, right? Is simply just the fixation on, it's an error to think you can fill a hole with water. You fill it with fucking dirt.
And now it's also tricked them into now thinking about Satanism and the devil, because now they've become fixated on that.
And so many people are, especially the cute people, like, they're Satan worshipers, they're blah. Yes, in a way, but like this whole Satanism is a very like extreme personification of the simple idea of that over-fixation on the physical world is just going to create a hole. And
speaking of cute people, right before you came here, I got a voicemail from someone who like heard me on Tinfoil Hat, and the voicemail was, "Hey, I got your number because I really wanted to talk to you about whether or not Trump ended the Federal Reserve by all the." I'm like,
my God.
Oh my God. So I put it on my Instagram, but now
he printed $10 trillion.
If anything, he's emboldened them, made them even stronger. I mean, now they own like Hertz rental car, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I know, right?
Talk about Hertz and like gigahertz and everything, and then now you got the Hertz. I mean, you probably have heard of the the rental car company that was bankrupt, and now they're doing an IPO in bankruptcy because all these traders on Robinhood who have no idea about the stock market are now pumping it in, because I mean it ties back to everything we're talking about, because then it ties back into like the penny stock thing and market cap, and so now it's been exploding in not financial advice, but it's been exploding in value because all these like penny stock day trader 10-year-olds are not playing Fortnite anymore because they're day trading during the trading hours. And even though they're at the pool, I heard some lady that like, obviously without offending anybody, you could tell she's not. Sort of like the shoe shine boy giving stock tips, and I overheard her talking about her Robinhood account, like just like a teacher just out swimming in a pool talking about day trading.
Agents
stuff.
of error, brother. They are agents of error, and it's also death by 1,000 irritations, right? If you're constantly irritated, right, by stoplights, by cops, by people, by lines, by drive-thrus.
People that are cops driving.
Death by 1,000 irritations, right? Like you just, this stoplight. We're in actual Senegal, Africa, I believe. This is at least what I heard anyway. My friend said that they have the lowest amount of traffic accidents in the world because they have no stoplights. Because people actually have to think, right? Stoplights, in a way, disable us, right? They make us dependent on this light to change, to think, and all these things. And it's also part of the death by 1,000 irritations. You ever wonder, like, you're at a light and you're like, why is this light red when blah, blah, blah? It's designed that way. It's designed to be inefficient. It's designed to be that because it keeps you constantly irritated. It keeps you constantly
And then they were like jacking with yellow lights to then be able to get more tickets. And actually not too far away from here, I guess, is like one of like the worst places like in the country of people running red lights and dying at like I think over like in Glendale and some other areas like literally some of the worst places in the world are like 15 minutes away from us.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it is bad. Like
Just to finish the point, because I feel it's important for people to know, because there's a lot of people that are saying a lot of terrible things. When you start talking about like vampirism, right? I mean, in the physical sense of it, right? Like, I mean, yeah, sure, you're extracting mana out of something, but you're just digging a deeper hole and you're trying to fill it with water, right? And then there's all these other constructs of like matter and evil and blah, blah, blah. I mean, which really is just the consumerism materialist agenda, right? I mean, that's all it really is just the overfixation on material things and the destruction of natural important things for that materialism, right? Like destroying rainforests, to create coconut oil or palm oil and,
everything could be hemp seed oil. Everything.
And so, I mean, in order to correct that, right? Because error needs to be corrected. We need to get more harmonious. We need to get more connected with the earth, more connected with nature, more connected with ourselves, right? And that is the antidote to this error, right? These errors that we're in. So like, just be careful about thinking in too dualistic of a perspective, because dualism is a delusion, I should say, or an illusion. Like in absolute light, right? If this room, if it was just nothing but light, like, I wouldn't be able to see you. If it was nothing but dark, I wouldn't be able to see you either.
Working on, I can turn on a few more of these.
Yeah, but so when opposites are carried to the extreme, they're alike. And if we go to this 2016 World War III thing, right? Like if they pulled it off in pandemic and all of that, what would happen is a massive depopulation because, like I said, there's not enough computing power to control 1984 7 billion people, right? Not even everybody's connected to the internet. There's too many unaccounted for people, right? They just can't account. They need.
So you can either increase computing power or kill off.
No, they
people.
can't. They
or
can't.
Kill off people was the second part.
Kill off people, yeah. So you need to get it down to about 2 billion, 3 billion, right? But now. Not
if we each have 5 devices. Or
yeah. So when we look at it too, though, right? World War III would have been a nuclear war, right? They were heating up for the whole century with the Cold War with Russia and all this thing, like nuclear war. That's the most effective way to kill 5 billion people, right? Nuclear war. But then here's the thing, right? They are agents of error, okay? Right? Remember I was saying they are agents of error. Error is, perpetuated far enough, compounded upon itself. Error can become quote unquote evil, Rich. If you spell live backwards, right, what is it? Evil, right? Life is about growth and learning and expansion. Death is contraction and reduction and loss, right? So evil is a product of death, right? Death of your soul, of your spirit, of your mind is when you stop learning. You stop learning when you stop correcting your errors. When your errors become perpetuated, you're not learning anymore. You're stagnant. You're stuck. You're dying. Leave, live, evil, blah, right? It's pretty simple. It's not like ooh-ah mystical at all, right? Wow. It's just very simple physics. But like, so you have these like dark and light delusions, right? Like you have the dark polarization that we've been through, right? Like, oh, the heat, the terrible, the people. Oh, so much war and famine. When's the world gonna change? We're destroying our planet. Greta, how dare you? You're destroying our generation. Greta Thunberg or whatever, right? Now, let's look at this. If they succeeded with the war, what's gonna happen? We're gonna have massive nuclear war. We're gonna have 5 billion people dead. So then we're going to have a massive financial reset, which was needed because
less CO2.
all of these fiat currencies need to be reset under one global, more sustainable fiat currency that they can last for a few hundred years, 500 years, whatever, right? For their new world order. But they would have gone, right? Since they're agents of error, where is error? Error is in polarized thinking, right? Absolute light, absolute dark. They're both errors, right? We're not in that of good and evil. There's that of two evils, excess and deficiency, light and dark, good and bad, right? Duality is the illusion. So when you can integrate those perspectives together, that's what we're going into. But what they wanted to do was create a swing to the other side of the polarity chain. And we've already seen early signs of that. The equality, gender, sexual equal, right? Oh, we must be equal. Tim, you can't believe anything different than me because that just breaks our oneness and we're all one and we're all connected. And so you can't say anything mean to me because when you do that, it's going to hurt my feelings. And I'm just as important as you. It doesn't matter if you're more skillful than me. I'm half mentally retarded, but I deserve equal treatment as you. So you need to actually be marked down with 10 equal points because you aren't equal to me because you were born with straight. And that's the light polarist agenda. Okay. That's the agenda that they're going to try to push. They're still trying it a little bit. They're trying to first create the darkness to make everyone like, oh, come save us. And they'll be like, we're going to save you with the light. We're coming in to change. And they will change things, but they change it to the light polarized.
I mean, and then you get back to like Cecil Rhodes of what's funny is my dog is actually Rhodesian Ridgeback, but Cecil Rhodes, I mean, was basically he's a Rothschild frontman that was in charge of De Beers. And he left his will. This is probably stuff you already know, but in case some people who out there aren't aware of this, but Cecil Rhodes left his entire last will and testament to creating a new world order, basically these roundtable groups. And the first one was the Royal Institute of Affairs out in Chatham House, London. And then the one out here in America was Council on Foreign Relations, or CFR. And I'm sure then there's so many rabbit holes I could go through.
Yeah, and it's just as it was said by the golden mean, right? It says that we're not in a world of good and evil, but a world of two evils, and that of excess and efficiency. And you need to find the golden mean between the two. You apply that same thing to polarity with light, right? Light and dark. Like, we need to find the balance between the two. And there's a propensity for us to polarize to either side, right? Right now, especially, there's a lot of polarizing happening. Black lives matter, white lives matter. Offender, gender equality, blah, 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 like bankers, government, like all these different people are like fighting for their polarized agenda, right? But what's going to change things is when we integrate these things, right? If you take the circle, right? You have a circle and you twist it, what does it look like? Infinity, right? So in the same sense, you have this infinite cycle of duality, positive, negative, and you're going through this cycle horizontally, laterally. The serpent moves on the ground because it represents just the movement of duality through matter, right?
I've even seen some things where the serpent was supposed to actually be a good symbol, and the eagle was supposed to be a bad symbol, and they went and then they...
The serpent symbolizes the formation of matter, the material world, which is not necessarily a problem. I mean, it's a bit of an error, but that's fine. It's whatever. We're learning, right? But it also symbolizes your kundalini, the 7-headed serpent, right? If you've heard that symbolizes the 7 chakras on the kundalini, right? The 7-headed serpent, right? It's just chakras are just batteries. They're just storages of energy, right? And this kundalini is kind of what brings them and holds them all together.
Is chakra sort of like a chi, or is that kind of
chakras
plays into it? Or?
Yeah, so chi, just think of chi in the conventional sense that people understand it is just an electromagnetic energy generated by the mixing of oxygen and blood sugar, right? Sugars in your blood, which creates your aura. We can actually measure and take pictures of your auras. It's science, right? You can go take aura photography. You'll see the colors of your aura. That's your lower mana field. That's chi. Your chakras are different filtered energy centers of it. So think about everything is, you have dimensions and then you have planes. Like, we're in the space-time dimension right now. You have forward, back, left, right, and time moving forward, right? But then you have planes within that, which are like octaves. So you have, like on a piano, C to C is the octave. That's the dimension. The notes between them are the planes. And so information in an octave or a dimension breaks itself up into different sequences of information, right? If you take white light and you put it through a prism, it's going to be a rainbow, right? What's the colors of the rainbow? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Oh, that's the colors of the chakras too. Why? Because that is the vibrational hierarchy of light. That's a vibrational hierarchy in which information and light will show itself in these different ranges, right? So same thing with our chakras, our energetic system, right? As we're generating all of this mana, you're going to have different essences of that energy in different places, right? And they're the 7 main power centers, and they move. They're just like big swirling batteries, right? And they store and hold your energy, right? So
are they trying to keep us down to these lower levels powers that were? Or?
Well, so this energy moves down, right? It moves in from the cosmos down through us. Now, at the base, you have what's called the root chakra. And that's the red chakra, right? Now, guess what blocks the root chakra? What emotion? Make a wild guess. It's not going to be hard.
Fear.
Very good.
Anxiety. Yeah.
So fear blocks the base system, which means it blocks the entire stream. So imagine like chakras as like different pools of water kind of moving down, and like water
blocks the entire stream. Block stream.
Block stream. Oh my gosh. I didn't think of that. Damn. So many cosmic
to the one person out there, dude, that maybe gets that.
It blocks the stream. Exactly. It's blocking the stream, right? Like
some super
yeah. I didn't even think, but that's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, so fear blocks the stream of energy flowing through us, right? So it backs up your entire system. So think about like a river, and at the very bottom of the river is a big dam. So the entire river is backed up, right? That's kind of what Bitcoin, right? That same thing, right? Like with the small block size, when your transactions take ages to confirm, think of that as like a blocked root chakra, right? With fear. Once you have tons of energy trying to move through the system, there's only a small space because it's blocked for it to move through. So you get this backlog, right? And the backlog pushes up into our system and fills us with all this like, because you don't just have fear as a blocker. There's guilt blocks your sacral, shame blocks your solar plexus, Grief blocks your heart. Lies blocks your throat. Illusion blocks your third eye, and attachment blocks your crown, right? So all of these things integrated together, then blocked by fear, people have a lot of guilt.
Or your corona. No.
Yeah, they have a lot of fear. They have a lot of guilt. I mean, if you think about it, Catholicism first installs fear, then it installs guilt, and then it installs shame, right? Those are moving up your chakras, blocking each one of them. So you're blocking the stream at every possible
if you can
point.
first block them with fear, then anything that slips by that one.
Then shame can't effectively be evacuated, right? Shame requires fear to be gone to be evacuated, right? So now you have this blocked fear, and then you have all this guilt and shame and grief and lies and illusions and attachments blocking the rest of the system, and those blocks can't get out because the fear is holding it, right? So that's why fear is such a powerful controlling force, right? They know about these things too. That's why they utilize it, and that's why they're such effective adversaries, right? I mean, they've done a great job controlling the world, but it's time for it to change, and that's,
And I think where I was originally trying to go, the Cecil Rhodes thing, it actually wasn't even about him. I meant to talk about Paul Warburg, who was the first basically head of the Federal Reserve. Basically, he was the godfather of the Federal Reserve, who said we shall have one world government. It's only if it's a matter of it's through consent or conquest. And I think the conquest part was, World War I, World War II. They realized that you can't have a guy with a funny little mustache, coming through, or can't have a Napoleon coming through and enslaving everybody. You've got to get people to beg for it. And so now setting up this like technocracy where people are saying, look at these, or they're just trying to beg for the solution.
Please save us from ourselves, please. And see,
and it could be like it's going to be like a digital dollar, and the digital dollar is going to be all tied up with this contact tracing.
The biggest error of everything that's happening right now is you giving up your sovereign right as an individual to save yourself, right? Religion, governments, all these things are trying to take your power away by saying you need someone to save you. You need Jesus to save you. You need the government to save you. You need the church to save you. You need to confess. All those things are just planting blocks in our energetic system. Fear of going to hell, guilt for your sins, right? When sins are natural, it's how we learn, we grow, right? Shame for our actions, grief because of and all these things that are constantly blocking us. They're designed to take your power away and make you believe that you need someone else to save you. And as long as you believe you need someone to save you, you're ripe for being exploited. You are full of security vulnerabilities and you will be hacked. But when you start taking things into your own hands and saying, what can I do to improve things? How can I contribute my sovereignty to the world and help be a part of this change? How can I save myself? And those are really, really important qualities for us to see nowadays, is this individual, sovereign self-reliance, right? The government right now, with their universal basic income, with all these things, they're trying to create dependency on them because that's the only way they can stay relevant. As long as we depend on the government, then people are going to see them as relevant, because with blockchain, with Nexus, like, we can run we were just talking about creating financial instruments, and like, you can create a trust account where you can lock your funds up in there and you can't even be robbed. You make it more powerful than a bank because it's mathematically locked, right? All these different, we pretty much at the point technologically.
If you rob people, you buy a bank. No.
The quality of life we exist at with technology and what the government provides for us can completely be supplemented and augmented, right, with this technology we have now. So the relevance of government, to me, is zero right now. The only relevance they can make themselves have is, we need to save you from people that are bad people, right? So trying to incite riots and stuff is going to be one thing that they're going to try to do, right? And then we'll save you from all these terrible wars and these pandemics, and, stay at home and then try to scare people from one another and like force people against each other and create all of this turmoil so that they can use that turmoil to save everybody. But the thing is, people are saving themselves, man, right? Like, even if they're throwing
gun ownership skyrocketing.
And even if people are throwing bricks through windows, man, like, I don't necessarily condone and support that as a means of change, but I do believe that
especially if it's agent provocateurs.
Yeah, I believe it's still part of the mechanism, and at least people are doing something, right? They're doing something. They're not waiting around for someone else to go riot for them. They're going at it. I mean, at least it's something, right? And at least they're not being like, oh, hey, I'm gonna have like the cops come save me, or like
I'm just gonna vote harder.
I'm just gonna vote so much harder. Like, people are actually taking, and that signifies that people are realizing the government is not going to save them. Now, this next conjunction I was telling you, the Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn conjunction at November 17th. Right now, there's an 87% probability of a Cat 3 hitting the East Coast this year because the Atlantic is much warmer than it should be, which is a recipe for very large hurricane activity. So I believe we're going to have a pretty severe hurricane season this year, which, if you remember 2017.
So a way to go by I remember your sister was down there, like in the Key West.
Yeah,
and you were at
2017.
Ernie's house freaking out because it was right as there's a big
Yeah. I mean, my mom decided to stay there. I was like, you're gonna die. I was like a Cat 5, and she was like, I'll be okay. I'm like, okay, whatever, you crazy woman. But yeah, I mean, so this year I'm predicting, right? Like, I mean, and this is based off of actual data too, that there's going to be a pretty severe hurricane season this year. And I think that's also going to further signify to people that the government cannot react, right? We're at a point too, with people, population-wise, where centralization cannot function. That's why I'm saying there's not enough computing power, there's not enough governmental representatives, there's not enough police. You can't effectively put in a 1984 society with the amount of people that there are right now. And that's part of the power that we have going for us, right? As long as we don't kill ourselves before then, right? Like, we have that going for us. Which
as long as we don't have a second round of bioengineered pandemic to come kill us all, then we'll be...
Yeah, I mean, and they'll try, but I think this
is all just seeding us for, round 2, round 3 of...
Some people have had those theories. I mean, I personally don't think this was a planned pandemic. Like, like I said, I think they're being reactive rather than proactive.
Like a bioengineered weapon that accidentally got out? Or?
Yeah, so the Wuhan virus facility actually is a specialist facility in manufacturing viruses, transferring them from animal to human. That's their main speciality, and they want to beat the curve that way. Based on just the properties of the coronavirus, I don't think it was an effective weapon, and I don't think they would in their right minds release an ineffective weapon. I mean, it was designed as probably a silent old person killer is what I would suspect it was, because you silent carriers, youth doesn't get it, old people to start dying. It could be branded as like a bad flu season, right?
This is how we solve Social Security.
Well, so yeah, it was part of the solving the Social Security issues and potentially working on anti-riots in Hong Kong or something, right? But then Patient Zero, I think, got it accidentally, right? And then they got out, and then it became never waste a crisis. Let's put out pandemic, and that's why it seems so poorly executed and like hyper draconian too.
Like it just jumped on something that was happening that it got out accidentally, and then
they got reactive, just like they were reactive to Trump, right? They were reactive to the stock market. They were reactive to oil, right? We watched it to charts still fucked, man. Like it's just minus 50.
Yeah, well, the stock market is sort of like, oh crap, we need to get the sheeple back in to sell them. And so I feel like this whole second rise, not financial advice, was to then dump it onto the sheeple.
Yeah.
And then you'd go back like 3 weeks ago, it was like a record amount of high net worth investors dumping stocks to going into actually cash and gold of all things.
Yep.
And so when you see the high net worth people and institutions going into gold, while at the same time talking down gold, while at the same time offloading their stocks to some teacher Robinhood trader, or I mean, literally, there's headlines of 10-year-olds who stopped.
I need to use the restroom.
Okay.
Hold on. Right. Yeah, just keep rocking. So I've been holding this for a minute.
Okay, maybe let's go like a round. Like maybe we'll do like a round 2, take a break.
Yeah, let's take a break in round 2.
We'll be back. We got into all sorts of stuff, but thank you for jamming with us. And for those who know, Colin, I mean, your dad's also was part of founding of SpaceX, and so people are wondering like, how you're dropping all this knowledge. You've had some probably good teachers along the way.
Yeah, taught myself pretty much everything I know, though. So I mean, it's just,
the best teacher. All right, guys, Colin's gonna go to the bathroom, but we'll be back for round 2.
All right,
and I'll see you guys later. All right, bye.